you know, my dad says, "Oh, what's going on over there?" He's a faller from the logging industry, right? So, you know, in the heyday. He's retired now. And he's like, "Oh, what's going on over there? You know, and what are you trying to do?" And I said, you know, I'm just like, "Can we please not talk shop at the table?" You know, you feel that pressure, you know, and in a small community. And it's a bit more anonymity in a bigger center. But in 1998, when we were trying to redefine Ucluelet, we were trying to think of, okay, what do we do to retain our character, our sense of place, while allowing development to occur? Because we had no development. There was nothing happening in Ucluelet. The first year I was there, we had one lot line variance for a house in a year, you know? So it gave us plenty of time to work on policy. So some of the things we worked on, ruralizing design for subdivisions, green infrastructure, alternative development standards, subdivision design. You know, we wanted to get into doing subdivisions a little bit differently, compact subdivisions, small lot. We wanted to get affordable housing in Ucluelet. We saw what was going on at Tofino. It was like a crystal ball, and we were saying, okay, how do we get away from, you know, people camping in the parks because they have no place to live? There's nowhere, not being able to buy houses because it's too expensive. Every house costs $600,000 to $1 million. Like, how do we get away from that? Implementing LEED standards, LEED ND and LEED building construction standards in Ucluelet. Never been done before. You know, how do we implement that? And creation of sustainable incentives. You know, okay, so how do we give incentives to developers for doing this kind of stuff? Working with the province. That's how we did, you know, DCCs. Sustainable planning policy. Changing the policy in your official community plans, your zoning bylaws. Change those policies so you can do what you want to do. I know I got a solicitor that we use, and every time I try to do something, he says, "You can't do that. You can't do that." And I'm like, okay, don't tell me what I can't do. I can't stand that. You know? I want to know how I can do it. Here's what I want to do. Tell me how I can do it. If it means legislative change, draft the legislative change. I'll find somebody in the province to talk to, like a guy like Chris. We'll fire it over there and see if we can change the legislation so we can do what we want to do. And a couple weeks later, you know, we got behind in our invoices, and he called and he said, "Well, do you want to check on those invoices? I haven't seen anything on our end for a little while." I said, "I can't do that." So, getting into implementation tools, we started messing around with subdivision design, like I mentioned earlier, approving officer, discretion, changing policy, acquiring control. OCP policy, we put in public access to the waterfront, affordable housing. I'll just touch on that later. LEED standards for buildings. We started implementing master development agreements to outline these policies and developers come into the community. We created donation agreements. $4 million we've negotiated just out of donations to the community since 2004. Just development negotiation. No policy behind it, strict, plain donation. Phased development agreements, new legislation which gives developers density surety in the future in exchange for amenities. That's new legislation that a lot of planners haven't and communities haven't quite grappled with yet. It's really powerful stuff. Great implementation tool in terms of getting amenities. And incentives and partnerships. So working with the province, creating incentives, the DCCs, you know, the waiving of DCCs for affordable housing, all that kind of stuff. You need to create these incentives. You can't just ask developers to do it all. You have to create incentives for them to do it. I'm going to quickly go through some pictures. So alternative development standards. Changing road widths. Gone are the days of 11 meters of asphalt. You can land a plane on that kind of stuff, you know. Getting into 6.5, 5 meters of asphalt, 20-meter right-of-ways instead of going into 15-meter right-of-ways. There's a picture of alternative development standards in a subdivision in Ucluelet with a path set off the road, narrow path, no 50-kilometer sight distance for the road. I'm sorry, the engineers out there, you know. We had to get away from doing things like that because we ended up with freeways. There's a 3-foot rain event in Ucluelet over 2 weeks. 3 feet. We get 14 feet of rain in Ucluelet per year. 14 feet. They don't call it the rainforest for nothing. So how do you handle that in terms of subdivision design? Well, we've got a lot of rock in Ucluelet. What we do is we create French drains. French drain systems handle the water way better than conventional storm drains, which are supposed to last for 100 years, and they flood out every 6 months, you know? So this is how we handle our rainwater in our newer subdivisions, through French drain design, right? So we have it engineered. We've got engineers that have bought into the process, and now we've implemented. Not just one subdivision, 3 subdivisions now. There's the same 3-foot rain event in a French drain. That's as high as it's ever got. There's permeable paths in subdivisions instead of paved. Places are still putting in overhead hydro. You know, I thought that's just archaic. You know, I mean, what day and age are we living in? We're still putting in overhead hydro. Start putting it underground. Tell us everything hydro can be shared. Servicing could be put between the road and the path. Public access to the waterfront, 100% public access to the waterfront. That's a policy that we put in our official community plan. In small communities, when you're on the waterfront, what happens is development occurs on the waterfront, all the waterfront gets taken up, there's no access to, to the waterfront for public or anyone else except for the people who go to the hotels. So we put that in our OCP. We dedicate that public access as right-of-ways. We've integrated public access into the waterfront, into newer subdivisions that connect to older subdivisions that connect to the town center. Those public access, those trails are built and financed by developers and built to our parameters. Wild Pacific Trail, give you some quick pictures of what we've created. We're moving the trail up all the way along the waterfront, and you cool it up to the Pacific Rim National Park. There are boardwalks, there are gravel, there are points at higher points, lookouts, and so we're moving up. We're going to connect it to the Pacific Rim National Park. Density bonusing, using density bonusing, higher density in exchange for cash or amenities or parkland. 14 million for a little town of 1,900. We've negotiated 14 million in density bonusing, which is quite the thing. You know, when you look at our budget and our tax base, 14 million buys a lot of amenities. We have put 6 million of it into our new community center, all from developers in exchange for density bonuses. Higher density, reduced building footprint, more sustainable type of development. Increased green space. In our subdivisions, we run at about 40 to 60% parkland dedication instead of the provincial minimum requirement 5%. It's 40 to 60. Or you can exchange them for affordable housing units. You can exchange density for affordable housing. That policy is already in place. Creating mixed use, comprehensive development. Instead of getting away from your typical residential, industrial, commercial, getting into mixed use development, getting some funky land uses out there which offer developers a lot of flexibility, come up with a great product in the end. So comprehensive development is just a mishmash of a whole bunch of different uses all in one. A unique zone. So there's some different density examples. That's a Talkali Resort in Ucluelet, higher density, more green space, boardwalk access to buildings that are tucked into the trees, Wild Pacific Trail that all of our development on the waterfront has to provide. The amenities that we've acquired through density bonusing, skateboard park, $250,000 skateboard park, $1 million community field, a basketball court, all amenities that actually I didn't have around when I was a kid in Ucluelet, and so now the kids in Ucluelet have these things, and there's families moving to Ucluelet because of that. LEED building standards, minimum LEED silver for all new development in Ucluelet. We have mandated it. We mandated LEED silver minimum for every development in Ucluelet. And since we have around 900 million in development being built out right now, that is a big deal for our community. We do gold LEED for all our municipal buildings. And we've created provincial partnerships and working with the province in terms of allowing us to do LEED in certain circumstances, giving us provincial legislation to back it up. We haven't got all the way there, as Chris mentioned, but we're getting there. And it's not telling other communities they have to do it.